Alright everyone, hello and welcome to Empuries. Empuries is a settlement in the coast of Spain. It is in the area of Catalonia, and today we are going to see a site that has lots of different levels of settlement. So the area has been lived in for about 7,000 to 8,000 years, but the first Greek settlement, the first version of Empuries called Empurion, was built in the 6th century BCE by colonizers from the Greek city of Phocaea, and I definitely completely butchered the pronunciation of that. It was used as a trading port, so seafaring vessels would come in here, they would deposit their goods, and then those goods would be travelled overland to other Greek colonies like Marseille in France, or traded with people like the Tartessians in the southwest of the Iberian Peninsula, who are definitely the Atlanteans. So the first version of the settlement was actually a little further away from here. It was on an acropolis type area, and it was fortified, and it was called the Paleopolis by Strabo, which just means old city. The one that we're about to see is the Neapolis, which was named by archaeologists thus because it is the new city, and it was used because the settlers realized that they had such an ideal location to create a port. So Empurion, as it was called back then, continues its importance into the Roman period. It sided with Rome during the Punic Wars, thus leading to a Roman expedition from the Gulf of Rosas, which is the area that we're in now, into the rest of Spain, led by Cato in 195 BCE. However, Empurion's luck didn't last forever, and during the first triumvirate they sided with Pompey against Caesar. Their rights as a separate colony were stripped and they were made part of the empire, and Roman veterans were settled here by Caesar. The reason for that was Caesar was then giving the people who had helped him militarily land and wealth, and also it would stop dissent among colonies if you had people who were favourable to the empire living there. Now, in the 3rd century CE, the settlement comes out of use because other more important Roman settlements show up, namely Barcelona, Girona, and Tarragona. Now, just because the settlement isn't used anymore, it doesn't mean that there's not continued civilization. The Neapolis is abandoned, people moved back to the Paleopolis and found Sainte-Marie de l'Empuries, and settlement continues through the late antiquity all the way through the Middle Ages and the medieval period. The site is never lost. It's been known about since the 15th century as a Greek and Roman settlement. Excavation begins in the 20th century and is continuing today, as only 20% of the Roman city, which we'll see after the Greek city, has been excavated. So let's go take a look. Here we see the walls of the Greek city. As you can see, the Greek city is extremely close to the ocean. This is because this is the Neapolis, which I mentioned, which was used as a port to control this area of the Gulf of Rosas, to make sure that trade came through here, and thus led to a wealth surplus in this city. Look, the ocean! Okay, here we are at the walls of the settlement. These walls are 2nd century, though they represent the place where the original 5th and 6th century walls would have been. You can see how big they are, and that's because these would have been defensive walls as well as just an entryway. This site was put next to an original Iberian settlement, so Iberian being settled by the people, lived in by the people who are native to this area, and I wonder if at the beginning there wasn't necessarily a good vibe between the Greeks and these original settlers. So we have to wonder if these walls were not only for defense from seaward attacks, but also from land attacks. Here, right before we go into town, we see a metallurgy factory. Now, the reason I point out metallurgy factories, normally when people think of Spain, they think of the Roman period. Now, this is 1st century, though it's in the Greek section. They think of Spain as being the area where fish salting and fish paste came from, which is a really big deal in Rome. I don't know why, because I don't really like salted fish, but okay. But Spain, and specifically certain areas of Spain, like southwestern Spain, were very well known for having good copper and zinc ores. And so here we see a metallurgy factory that could have had these ores transported from other parts of Spain, brought here, worked, and then transported back into the main areas of the empire. So here is the Asclepieion. It's a 2nd century BC building. For those of you who don't know, Asclepius is the god of medicine and the son of Apollo. And that's a statue of him over there, and this is his temple. It's a very frontal temple, as you can see, and it probably is part of a larger complex, some sort of working out area, or maybe a sanctuary for people who are sick. You see you've got some like more altars over here, a little column base going on, and over here you've got another little altar area. This has obviously been reconstructed for conservation purposes. Now this temple, which is handily across the way from the Asclepieion, which is over there, is the Temple of Zeus Serapis, and it's a 1st century building. As you can see, it is attached to the walls. That's because Zeus Serapis is not a primarily Greek god. He is a Greek and Egyptian god, because Serapis is Egyptian. Well, kinda. He's kind of like Greco-Egyptian. It's complicated, and I don't really know what's going on. But anyway, this is because, for the Romans at least, having a non-Greco-Roman god inside the city limits was actually frowned upon, because a lot of the emperors didn't like the Egyptians. So this is why this would have been on the outskirts of the city and right next to the wall, because while it is Zeus Serapis, it's still partially Egyptian. What's cool about having this site here is it shows cross-cultural values even in this part of the empire, that this kind of Egyptian belief and Greco-Roman belief is still coming in at this point. And I'm saying empire even though we're in the Greek city, because it's 1st century BCE, and that is, you know, slap bang Augustus, you know, let's get this going on. And here we have the best view of the Asclepieion. First we can see Asclepius right there, and then we can see that there's even a bit of tesserae mosaic remaining on the bottom. We've got some white bits there, we've got some decoration, we've got a crosshatched one in the room behind, very nice. Here you can see the base of the temple, that's how high it would have been. And then of course this is the inner Sacellum, which would have had the statue. Now this is a great time to mention the concept of syncretism, which is my favourite religious concept. It is an idea brought about mainly by the Egyptians, in which they would combine multiple gods together to create a newer, more powerful god, like Voltron. Anyway, Zeus Serapis is interesting because it is a combination of a Greek god and then a Greco-Egyptian god, because Serapis isn't technically just Egyptian. You don't see him in the Old Kingdom or Middle Kingdom, you see him in the New Kingdom when there's Greek influence coming in. So what we have here is a Greek god being merged with an Egyptian god originating from Greek influence and being seen in the Roman period, and that is super cool. This whole area, you can see the Asclepieion back there and the Serapeion over there, are all part of the temple precinct. It's a very, very large religious area, which is interesting considering other than these two temples, in the Paleopolis there's a really old temple to Artemis, and then in the Roman city we've got a temple to the Capitoline Triad, but that's it for religion-wise. Oh, look, a hole in the ground. Here we are, my favourite part of any site at all, the fish salting factory, 1st century BCE, which means it is the Romans back at it again with their garum, fish sauce, and their salty fish, because the Romans are salty. Here you can see one of the facilities where they would, now you can see one of the facilities where they would have kept the salty fish to make the fish paste, and here's another one down there. It's always, you gotta look for the square-shaped things. Basically what it is. So you may be wondering why you need so much space for a temple. As I mentioned before, this is probably a sanctuary for people who needed to feel better and, you know, pray to the god to get rid of the plague, or I don't know, something like that. But also, temples were a place of storage, so you would store grain and things in temples, or under temples more specifically. Or take the Temple of Saturn, for instance, in the Forum, it was used to store wealth. So this one, obviously, you can see there's water flowing underneath it, which leads into that cistern, but there's probably also just storerooms around the temple, and that's why there's so much space. And I mean, this is true for a lot of temples that you see. It's just a lot of unused space, but there would have been stuff in it. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I am always a slut for ceramics. I love me some ceramics. So here we are, gonna look at some amphora. Now, what's great about these is these are a 3rd century BCE water filtering thing. So you can see on the sign there, water filter, perfect. So obviously these have been restuck up. I doubt they were found like this with the cement in the middle. But these amphora have an opening at the base that would have been filled with filtering materials. I don't know what kind of filtering materials would have been used here, but I'm assuming it was so that they had clean water for the Asclepiaeon directly behind us. And also so that they could get the salt to make those salty fish. Look at these things. These are amazing. I love amphora. I bet you if you took one out the ground, which obviously you should, I bet if you did, you'd see that they have the little feet on them too. Awesome. And right next to that water filtering facility, we have a cistern, which is probably where they kept the water while it was waiting to be filtered. Actually, this is 2nd century, so who knows, because it's a century later. I'm sure there must have been a cistern associated with the amphora though. Oh my god, there's a lime kiln! Okay, so this is, oh my god, it's 17th to 18th century. I know it looks like absolutely nothing. Lime kilns are my favorite thing on archaeological sites because they showed that they were still in use even during that late period of time. Also, this is the Acropolis, by the way, because we're higher up. Lime kilns, so basically, that's why you don't see anything left of temples, because these people would come along and they would just strip the temples of all the marble and then they turn it into lime. And there's a kiln right behind the Asclepiaeon. That's cool. Alright, so I'm not big on domestic archaeology, but here we have a 2nd century peristyle house. Peristyle basically means this is the garden that has columns around it, and the area that we are standing in, which is around the garden, would have been shaded so that you could walk around your garden on a hot summer's day without actually breaking a sweat. And then you could have looked at your lovely little plants, which would have been in this gravelled area. Now, peristyle houses were the homes of the rich. They were the villas of the suburb area of the Roman Empire, or, you know, the frontiers. So it's probably that the people who owned this house would have been the people who owned the fish salting factories right across the road. Remember those? Yeah. Alright, here we have a 2nd cistern, which is the central area of the 2nd century Hellenistic Macellum, or marketplace. So this is where you'd come, bring your wares, and hopefully sell them. And here is where you would have had the shops, so people could have either rented shop spaces, like the ones over here, or they would have just set up shop, you know, grabbed their little tables and their little canopies and put them out. So you could have had permanent shops and market stalls. And the Macellum, of course, is right next to the Agora and Stoa area, which we will go to in a moment. Alright, we're just going to do a wide pan of the Agora and Stoa area. You guys know what this is. It's a place where economic, political activity happened. Lots of people had shops, lots of people shouted at each other, you know, the good stuff. Unfortunately, most of it's been gravelled over so that people can walk in it, so there's nothing much to see archaeologically, aside from some rocks. I do love me some rocks. So the Paleochristian Basilica is a 4th to 7th century AD structure, which was also used for burial. So here we see some very early type burials, or, you know, cheap ones, in which the sarcophagi are made out of reused tiles or out of local slate. Then we have some fancier ones here, which are carved out of stone and made to look very nice, and these are the tops of them. We also have a different type of burial over there, which are holes in the wall that would have been used for urns that had cremation in them. Often you would buy a hole in the wall for you and your family, and you'd all be put in a little pot there together. And here we can see there's a very nice floor that's been preserved over there. Very nice pebble floor. Do like to see that. Now when you see cisterns, you have to remember that all cisterns would have had a semicircular cover to them like this one. So when you see them open, you have to remember that that is not what they would have looked like. And last but not least for the Greek site, here we have a pottery kiln. Gotta love that pottery. Next to that lime kiln I mentioned earlier. Not from the same period. This obviously is 3rd to 2nd because it's actually a Greek pottery kiln. I think this is another private house back here. Very fancy, very nice, and some sarcophagi over there. So the Roman part of the city hasn't been as well excavated as the Greek part. You see on the map is decidedly larger, and only about 20% has been dug up. But it consists of 2 large domus, or domi as you come in, and insulae, which are apartments. Oh, look, a tile. And then the rest of the civic centre. So let's go look around. So this is the entrance to one of the domus. You can see in the middle is the place. So this was the only part that wouldn't have had a roof. because that's where the water would have fallen in, the impluvia. And this building, this room, sorry, with the mosaic, because it's at the front. Oh no, I lied, we're at the back, So this would have been a dining room of sorts, because it's quite large. The Romans didn't put much stock in bedrooms, so those would have been quite small. And on the other side of this room you can see there's one that's open to the front. Might have been a shop front or something of the sort. I always like it on archaeological sites when they have peristyle gardens and they actually try and put plants back into the peristyle garden. It gives you more of a sense of what the site, what the house actually would have looked like. Now this has 2 peristyle gardens because it's very fancy. These domuses, whatever you want to call them, are 1st century BCE to 1st century CE. So we're looking at the height of this site during its Roman occupation. Let's do a bit of a walk around the domus as if we were coming in. So this is the entrance to the house. This is the impluvium. This one's got some nice columns. These rooms to the side would have been cubiculum or storerooms. And then you would have come into the peristyle gardens because there's 2, which are on the side, which is different to the Greek place that we saw, in which the peristyle garden was directly behind the entrance. Get some video of the marble, since this is the good Roman shit. Indeed. Little dolphins. Little dolphins. These are the 1st to 2nd century CE baths. I made a video before saying that they were the insulae, and they're not. I'm a liar. The insulae are being excavated and are further back that way. So these are the public baths. You can see these bricks underneath are not just randomly stacked as such. They are the basis for the hypocaust flooring, which is how warm air was able to travel underneath the baths and heat the surface, as well as the reconstruction of the agora from the top of the temple, which is also reconstructed. They put a plan of the temple on the floor, which is actually really cool. From here we see the Basilica and Curia, which is where business took place on the side. And over here we see the Ambulatorium, which I completely just butchered that, which again is a walkie round area in the shade, kind of like the Stoa we saw in the Greek Agora. Awesomely enough, Empuries has a cryptoporticus. You've got to imagine that this place would have been filled with market stalls and shops, and also covered, so it would have been quite dark. Now, cryptoportici are great because, again, they are areas to walk around and socialize without being in the hot sun, because the Romans didn't have air conditioning. And they were old and complained a lot. And that is a bad combination. Here we are on the outside of these walls at the palestra. So here's where you'd like get naked, cover yourself in oil, and wrestle people. Run around, you know, the normal stuff. And over here we have the amphitheater. So this wall was built in the 1st century. It is Roman. So I'm not sure why the palestra is outside the wall. I get why the amphitheater would be, you know, you've got lots of plays going on, it's really loud. But I guess maybe palestras were also loud, full of annoying people. So, as we should remember from the video I made in the Colosseum, an amphitheater means 2 theatres put together. And as we know, theatres are not perfectly half circles, they are half ovals, which means when you put a theatre and a theatre together, you get an avocado. This episode is brought to you co-starring my mum. Who is it, Mum?
Zeus.
It's not Zeus. Who is it?
It's the one-armed man.
Who is it, Mum?
Scipion.
Scipion. Okay, and who's he the son of, Mum? This is a...
Scipion Jr.
This is a book you've just been reading. Who is he the son of?
I haven't finished reading
Who's he
it.
the son of?
Apollo.
Oh man. Hello and welcome to round one of Greek, Roman, Paleo-Christian or Atlantean. Behind us we have a very large structure and my guest star is my dad, who is going to guess what era the building is from.
Well, looks a bit Atlantean to me, but I'll say Roman.
You are incorrect. This is a Paleo-Christian basilica. However, your answer is probably the second best one because basilicas were Roman inventions.
Okay.
Here we are in the middle of the Roman Forum with a temple behind us. Now we're in round two of our game, Guess That God. And here is our special guest dad. Which god does this temple belong to?
Zeus.
It's
Hermes.
Roman.
Hades.
It's Roman.
Jupiter.
Jupiter?
You mean Jupiter? I mean Jupiter.
Who is this temple dedicated to? It's in the
Apollo.
Roman Forum. Okay, now you're just randomly saying stuff. It is dedicated to the Capitoline Triad, of which Jupiter is one, also Juno and Minerva, because every single Roman forum, no matter where you are in the Roman Empire, has a Capitoline temple in it.
Guys, look at the baby sickle. It's a little baby sickle. What are those? It's Asclepius.